Is the world entering a new era of conflict, economic uncertainty, and technological disruption?
It really feels that way when you look at the news lately.
Right. I mean, from escalating tensions in the Middle East to this, growing rivalry between the United States and China.
And then you add in a global economy that is it's struggling under persistent inflation and rising debt.
The big question is, what does all of this mean for the future of the world? And specifically, for Asia?
That is the exact question we're tackling today.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating piece of source material, the Asian Tribune's Monday Geopolitical Analysis.
Yeah, it's a fantastic briefing.
It really is. It brings together global politics, economic shifts, and strategic developments into one clear picture with a real focus on how these global events shape Asia and the emerging world.
And our mission today is to deconstruct this analysis. The Asian Tribune identifies 5 major pillars of instability, and they connect the dots between global chaos and specific regional impacts.
I have to say, I was pretty enthusiastic reading this. It feels like a cheat sheet for understanding the world's problems right now.
It does. It moves beyond just reporting isolated events and starts showing how they reshape the entire global order.
Exactly. So let's jump right into the first pillar the analysis covers, which is the Middle East. Specifically, the intensification of the conflict in Gaza.
Right. The report notes that we're seeing renewed military operations and, crucially, that ceasefire negotiations have stalled.
And obviously, the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate, which is raising a lot of international concern.
It is an immense tragedy. But the analysis makes a quick pivot here to the strategic implications, which are much wider than just the immediate crisis.
Yeah, the report focuses heavily on this idea of a chain reaction.
Exactly. The primary risk they highlight is the potential for drawing in regional actors.
Which could, destabilize the entire Middle East. It's not just a localized issue anymore when you look at it through that lens.
No, it's not. And the briefing explicitly connects this geopolitical instability directly to global energy markets.
Because energy markets are incredibly sensitive to what happens in that region. If this conflict is prolonged, the report points out that it could push oil prices significantly higher.
And this is where we bring it back to Asia. If you are an economy in Asia, higher oil prices are a massive problem.
Right, because so many of those countries are net importers of energy.
Precisely. If energy prices spike, it impacts everything from manufacturing costs to consumer prices across the continent. It's a direct hit to their economic engines.
So you have a humanitarian crisis that triggers a regional security crisis, which then triggers a global energy crisis. It really shows how interconnected these pillars are.
And that interconnectedness is the main theme of the Asian Tribune's briefing, which actually leads us right into their second major geopolitical flashpoint.
The deepening strategic rivalry between the United States and China.
Right. And the report makes it very clear that the scope of this rivalry has expanded way beyond just trade tariffs.
Yeah, they say it now involves artificial intelligence, semiconductor technologies, and military positioning in the Indo-Pacific.
It's a full spectrum competition.
And the analysis identifies Taiwan as the major flashpoint here. They say it's keeping the whole region on edge.
Because of its critical role in the semiconductor supply chain. But the broader dilemma the report flags for the rest of the world is this concept of competing spheres of influence.
I thought that was a really interesting way to phrase it. Competing spheres of influence.
It implies a return to a more divided world. The analysis notes that countries are increasingly being forced to navigate a really delicate balancing act between the US and China.
And for Asia, the report says this balancing act is becoming, quote, more complex and more critical.
You can't just easily trade with both sides without friction anymore. You have to make strategic choices about technology standards, supply chains, and security partnerships.
Which is incredibly stressful for developing nations that rely on both superpowers for different things.
Absolutely. And that stress is compounded by the third pillar the Asian Tribune analyzes, the global economic squeeze.
Oh man, the economic section of this report is a heavy read. It starts by pointing out that despite everyone hoping for some relief, global inflationary pressures are just incredibly persistent.
They really are. And because inflation isn't cooling down as fast as hoped, the report notes that central banks, specifically the US Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank, are delaying their interest rate cuts.
They're keeping rates higher for longer. And the report connects those high US interest rates directly to what they call the strong dollar problem.
This is a crucial mechanism to understand.
Let's break that down for the listener, because when people hear strong dollar, they might think, well, that sounds like a good thing for America, right?
It might be good for Americans traveling abroad, but the analysis explains why it creates massive, massive pressure on developing economies.
Especially those with high levels of external debt.
Right. If you are an emerging market and your government or your big corporations have borrowed money in US dollars, a strong dollar is a nightmare.
Because your local currency is weaker in comparison. So it suddenly takes way more of your local money to pay back the exact same amount of US dollar debt.
Exactly. You haven't borrowed any more money, but your debt burden just got much heavier.
And the Asian Tribune puts this right into the Asian context. They mention that for many Asian countries, managing debt sustainability is becoming increasingly challenging.
It sucks capital away from investment and growth. You're just spending your resources servicing old debt.
Which makes their economic recovery, as the report says, uneven and fragile.
And just when these export-driven Asian economies need a smooth global trading system to try and grow their way out of this debt.
We hit the fourth pillar, disrupted trade routes.
Right back to physical security.
Yeah. The report specifically focuses on the attacks on commercial vessels in key routes like the Red Sea.
This ties right back to the instability in the Middle East we talked about earlier.
It does. And the analysis maps out the ripple effect of this so clearly. They point out that these attacks lead to companies rerouting their shipments.
Usually around the Cape of Good Hope, which adds weeks to the journey.
Right. And rerouting leads to major delays and much higher shipping costs.
Because you're burning more fuel and tying up cargo capacity.
And then the final link in that chain, higher shipping costs, eventually translate into higher consumer prices worldwide.
Which feeds right back into the persistent inflation problem we just discussed. It's a vicious cycle.
It really is. And the report highlights that these disruptions are particularly significant for export-driven Asian economies.
If your entire economic model relies on reliably shipping manufactured goods to Europe and the US, a bottleneck in the Red Sea is a strategic threat, not just a logistical annoyance.
So we've got geopolitical conflicts, a strong dollar crushing debt sustainability, and fractured supply chains pushing up inflation.
Why?
It's a very heavy geopolitical landscape. But there is a fifth pillar the Asian Tribune brings up, and it shifts gears a bit: the AI race.
The technological disruptor.
Yeah. The report talks about the massive acceleration we're seeing here. Major technology companies and governments are just pouring money into AI capabilities.
And it's important to note how the source frames this. They reframe artificial intelligence from just being a neat tool, like generative AI or basic automation, into a defining factor of future global power.
That is a huge distinction. The analysis argues that the countries leading in AI are the ones that will shape the future of both economic and military power.
They're treating it as a strategic domain, like aerospace or nuclear technology in the 20th century.
Right, and for Asia, the report lays out a very clear mandate. It says the challenge is to innovate, adapt, and remain competitive or risk falling behind.
But think about how hard that mandate is, given everything else we just discussed.
Do you mean?
Well, the report says you have to innovate and invest in AI. But if your economy is struggling with high energy costs from Middle East tension and high debt payments from a strong US dollar, where do you find the capital to compete in the AI race?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is the real squeeze. It takes billions of dollars and massive energy resources to build AI infrastructure.
Exactly. So the risk is that the gap between the countries that can afford to dominate AI and the countries that can't is just going to widen rapidly.
Which brings us perfectly to the synthesis of this whole briefing. The Asian Tribune includes a strategic summary that connects all these trends.
This is where they talk about the convergence.
Right. The convergence of geopolitical conflict, economic pressure, and technological transformation. They aren't isolated events, they are intersecting forces.
And when you put them all together, they are actively reshaping the global system.
The report states that the coming years will test the resilience of nations and institutions.
Resilience is the key word there. It's no longer just about optimizing for efficiency and fast growth. It's about whether your country or your supply chain can take a hit and keep functioning.
And the conclusion the source draws for Asia is stark. Future success is defined entirely by the ability to adapt.
You have to be agile. You can't rely on the old rules of globalization because those rules are being rewritten in real time by these 5 pillars.
It really makes you step back and look at the big picture. The source's sentiment throughout this whole analysis is that the world is changing not gradually, but rapidly.
The decisions being made today, whether it's about investing in AI, securing new energy routes, or managing US dollar debt, are going to shape the global order of tomorrow.
And it leaves you with this very clear feeling that understanding these changes is no longer optional. It is absolutely essential to staying ahead.
You really have to see the whole board, not just the individual pieces.
And, as a final thought for you listening, think about what this convergence means for you personally. The report focuses on nations and institutions, but if the global system is moving from efficiency to resilience, maybe that's a mandate for individuals too.
That's a great point. Adapting your own skills and understanding to a more volatile world.
Exactly. Navigating your own balancing act. Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive into the Asian Tribune's analysis.
It's a critical briefing for anyone trying to understand where we're headed.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this conversation. Stay informed, stay ahead, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.